The Gardener's Story. In the middle of the 16th century, Peter Bruegel the Elder painted a picture of the crucifixion. The choices he made in depicting the procession to Calvary and the scene on Golgotha will probably surprise you if you don't already know the painting. The crucifixion is shown in the far background of the painting, which is teeming with life, activity, and people, going on with the business of everyday life, utterly unaware of the political execution happening in their midst and its religious significance. Bruegel's painting is both realistic and an accusation. Why would yet another regular piece of Roman rough justice have all the attention of the people in Jerusalem that spring festival day? If you're not directly involved, don't be directly concerned. That's true of human nature in the 1st century, the 16th century, and today. These series of meditations try to imagine what that might have been like for people who were on the fringes of significant events that first Holy Week, and yet who didn't realize it. People for whom life was all about where the next piece of safety and security might come from, and who weren't concerned with the monumental political and religious events happening in their midst. Such an attitude is, understandably, still with us today. In Bruegel's painting, everyone is wearing contemporary dress, and Jerusalem looks like a prosperous town in early modern Flanders. Do we ourselves still stand uncomprehendingly on the sidelines of events that change the world? In the words of the prophet Jeremiah, "Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by?" How are we, like the people of the city and countryside of Jerusalem, witnesses to the Passover? It's a dirty job, they usually say. But then they add, and I'm glad it's not me that has to do it. And without a hint of gratitude. No, and I'm glad that somebody does it, or even, and I'm glad that you do it, Bartholomew. I mean, I don't expect much in this world, and I know that I live in hard times in a hard land, but just occasionally, it would be good if a little word of thanks could fall like refreshing rain into my path. Of course, I know all the reasons why I get ignored in this way. Everybody dies, and no one wants to be reminded of it. Everyone, in the long run, is dead, and nobody wants the long run to be shortened. It's funny. It's as if being reminded of death or coming into contact with death will somehow shorten their lifespan. That's not the case, a rabbi once told me with a scarf wrapped around his face in case he forgot to keep away from me. Being near the dead does not shorten our lives. It just shortens our useful lives. Coming into contact with the dead is a good thing when we are performing the duties required of us towards our mother and father. But even then it means that we become ritually impure and are thus unable to worship God in the way He requires. Cleansing ourselves of such impurity takes time, and that is time away from the study of God's Word, away from worshipping God in synagogue and temple, away from sacrifice. Life is too short to miss out on important things. And then he threw a copper coin at me and told me to go away in most unrabbinical language. So, if you haven't guessed already, I deal with the dead. A Jew who spends most of his days amongst unclean bodies. I may as well have been a pork butcher. But like I say, someone has to do it, and it may as well be me. Of course, I don't say I'm a grave digger, because I'm not. And I'm not like those barking mad Egyptians with their nose tools and jars of body bits and wrappings and spells and endless coffins. I like to describe myself as a gardener. I just happen to be a gardener among the tombs. Even the dead like flowers, I sometimes say, but not when anyone's listening. I think it's probably blasphemous. No rabbi I've heard of says there are flowers in Sheol, and the shades of the dead don't have senses to smell the blooms. But even so, I have to have something to keep me going. It's not that the tomb gardening business is dying out. It's a growth business. Everyone dies sooner or later, and with the Romans and the insurrections, it appears that the fashion is for sooner. This used to be a nice quiet quarter of the hill, well outside the city, and above the valley of Gehenna, the hellhole of the dead, my old dad always used to say. It's not quite 50 cubits from the city walls, as that old law used to demand, but that's because the city walls keep moving outwards. However, it was peaceful, and the rock was soft for cutting the tombs into. No pretentious burials here, no mock houses or palaces, no one thinking the mausoleus, or whatever that Persian king was called. Just shelves, in the caves, in the rock, and if they're feeling flush, or frightened of grave robbers, then a stone to roll in front. And me, outside, keeping the paths swept, and the flowers watered, and the garden lovely. That's how it was. Then the Romans came and decided to do a bit of urban rezoning. This convenient mound just outside the city with good sightlines in all directions, well, that's ideal for a killing ground. Up with the crosses and the gibbets, and all of a sudden business takes a nosedive. Who wants to be buried near the Roman crucifixion ground? You're coming to transfer the bones of your dear mum into an ossuary, and you walk slap into the middle of an execution of 20 zealots. Puts a bit of a damper on the whole day, you might say. That's why I was grateful to Joseph from Arimathea, a real gent, old school. His family have used tombs here for generations, and he had reserved one of my nicest new developments for himself. Didn't mind me letting people know either. Oh yes, Joseph of Arimathea will eventually be buried here. You know him, member of the Sanhedrin, a counsellor, a righteous man. That's the class we get here. Put not your trust in members of the Sanhedrin, as my old dad used to say, because yesterday Joseph let me down. The nicest new development, that freshly cut tomb, complete with window slits and a rolling stone that was going to be his honours, got used. And not for Joseph, for an execution burial. Bit of a rush job, if I'm to be entirely fair, and perhaps Joseph didn't have much choice with it being the eve of the Sabbath as well, but why did he make the burial his responsibility? As far as I can tell, the dead man wasn't a member of Joseph's family. Galilean by all accounts, and not from a good family either. I know that even good families can get caught up in Roman justice, but I don't think that was the case here. The dead bloke was caught bang to rights, upset the Sanhedrin and the Romans simultaneously. From what I hear, and it's all second and third hand, there was a bit of a ruckus earlier in the week when he upset the apple cart in the temple. No, not a real apple cart, I mean all the stalls and businesses there. It was Caiaphas's idea, the old high priest. Tidy up the merchandising of the temple, clear out the mess, make things more efficient and streamlined. Get the policies right and the profits will follow. Apparently, Caiaphas had decided that the temple would only accept pre-approved sacrifices. All sacrifices from lambs down to pigeons had to be bought from stalls that sold temple priest-assessed stock. Seems reasonable to me. People used to turn up with some ropey old beasts. Wouldn't be acceptable for a shepherd's brothel, let alone for a sacrifice to the living God. Then there would be ructions, backs and forths between the peasant and his mangy dove who thought it was good enough for Gideon, and the priest who wouldn't have touched it with a Roman spear. Now, under Caiaphas's plan, when people bought the lamb, they knew it came with priestly approval. Neat, tidy, efficient. Which was what the Galilean upset. Stalls flying, money rolling, animals squawking, priests shrieking, and him in the middle of it, threatening the temple's very existence. Nut job. The Romans wouldn't have liked that anyway. P and Q is their motto. Peace and quiet. Because that leads to profits and quotas. But then the Galilean, or some of his lunatic supporters, started mentioning the K word. Now, I'm a tomb gardener, lowest of the low, and even I know that Caesar in his palace in far-off Rome is the only person who gets to decide who is or isn't a king. Once you start letting any John, Luke or Quintus claim that he's a king, you'll end up with insurrection and all-out war. And all-out war isn't good for business. I can't bury in a day all the bodies that a Roman legion can crucify in an hour, and people tend not to want to pay for burials then. So, between the temple and the Romans, the Galileans' week was spoiled. Quick arrest, quicker trial, quick execution, all done before the Passover is over and before the trouble could get out of hand. Say what you like about Annas and Caiaphas, they know how to act quickly. And old what's-his-name in the Praetorium, Pilate, he doesn't muck around either. Bish bash bosh, troublemaker stopped, and my nice new tomb filled. I suppose it is, as my friend Levi says, a cost-benefit analysis. I've lost a tomb and a good family connection to the tomb. That's cost. On the other hand, the Romans have stopped short of an all-out massacre, which means I can carry on selling tomb spaces one at a time. That's benefit. Oh, and one other thing. For some reason, killing him stone dead wasn't enough. The temple and the Praetorium didn't want the body to disappear either. They've posted guards on the tomb. Bit of a slur on my name and reputation. This isn't the kind of burying ground where grave diggers sell access right to grave robbers, and I could mention some by name. Never had a body go missing in 50 years of business. That's cost. However, Roman soldiers get very thirsty sitting in the sun, and I've got rather a nice vintage from Carmel I can sell them. Benefit. I don't mind working on the Sabbath. As they say, someone has to, and I'm glad it's me. Tomorrow will be another matter. The family will come and finish off the burial rites. If they don't have all the ointments they need, I can always supply what's missing. And I suppose I'll be able to have a word with Joseph of Arimathea. I need to know when I get vacant possession of the tomb once more.